Yes, return.
Okay. Thank you, James.
Thank you.
Thank you. When you are ready, Alison, we can start.
Yeah, let's just start. Let's just do this.
Yeah. I will record now. Let's start our event today for something I have interested before to see. I think people centered transition recommendations. I have this event before I assigned for it. When I see that, it's a good idea to see what is the ideas about transition itself, what's the ideas about how you can make the transition in case of the existing industry of petroleum engineering or oil industry. Especially, I'm a petroleum engineer, so how to go further for the transition. It is very interesting topic for us. So I hope you as attendees and audience, and for me as well, to have a good presentation today and see how Matt and Alison will give us their insights about that. First of all, I will introduce myself. This is Mohammed Shawaf, a wind intervention engineer at Khalda Petroleum Company based in Egypt, and a YMEC member. YMEC is Young Member Engagement Committee in SP International for YP and student and fresh grad events for all over the world. We supported a lot of events, Petropol, paper contest, ELA, and different events that's related to young professionals and students. Now, one of our rules that support the transition or energy transition for young professional like me. So today we have a rule and a good hosting for that event, people-centered transition recommendations. So that is me on behalf of YMEC to represent YMEC for you. Today event will be recorded and live streamed on YouTube channel of us, YMEC Young Professional Member Engagement Committee. You can see event later if you have a busy schedule or you don't have registered before. So it is recorded for you. You can find it in our YouTube channel and also for our LinkedIn profile. That is for me and that's for YMEC. The floor is your, Alison.
Okay, thank you very much, Mohammed, for kicking things off, and thank you to YMEC for helping us host this event. I think the just transition is all about the social impacts of decarbonisation, and I think obviously our young professionals are at the heart of that because they're going to be seeing that for a long time. So I think it's a really appropriate collaboration. So a really quick intro of who I am. Alison Isherwood. I'm an independent reservoir engineering consultant for 25 years now, but more recently I've branched into geothermal and sustainability consulting after completing some postgrad studies in sustainable business at University of Cambridge. And I mention that because one of the big research projects I did as part of that was looking into the just transition and how we connect oil and gas workers to the future of energy. And I think, so I'm really delighted to be helping shape a series of events with SP Gaia that kind of explores this. So this is our second event. The first one can be accessed in SP Live, and this one, similar to the first, is looking at it from a broad perspective, really helping people understand what the term means. And I think it's really appropriate that we've got Matthieu from the International Energy Agency to talk around that, because obviously they're a very key organisation in kind of tracking and supporting decarbonisation of energy. So with that, I'm very happy to welcome Matthieu Prin to this fireside chat. Matthieu has worked at the International Energy Agency since 2020, and he project manages the IEA's work with the Global Commission on People-Centered Clean Energy Transitions. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. He also coordinates the IEA Energy Efficiency in Emerging Economies program. Prior to IEA, he focused on international city diplomacy and culture-led socio-economic sustainable development. He holds an MA in urban governance from Sciences Po Paris and a BA in international relations from the University of California in Los Angeles. So welcome, Matthieu. I believe you're going to share a few slides just to kind of kick off and show people about the Global Commission. So if I share those, I'll let you kick off. Let me hear.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Alison, and thank you to you as well, Mohammed, and thank you to the Society of Petroleum Engineers for organizing this timely Just Transition series and for inviting the International Energy Agency to participate. So, as you know, the IEA works for governments around the world. We support them on energy and climate policy, and I think that's it's probably important here that as we're talking about a global transition and doing so to avoid the worst effects of global climate change, it's important to mention that last year we've seen a proliferation of net zero pledges from countries and companies around the world. We've seen higher levels of climate ambition, which is all very welcome, of course, but at the same time, we're not really seeing that turning into the right kind of action on the ground. And in fact, analysis from the International Energy Agency last year showed us that in 2021, CO2 emission from energy went in fact higher, that we saw a rise in energy-related emission, and then that was actually one of the highest in decades. So this is obviously not the direction of travel that we need to take, and that is really why at the IEA, our focus has really been on working with governments around the world to support them on implementation, in implementing their climate goal. And of course, a real key component of that is about ensuring people are at the center of the clean energy transition strategies that are required for us to reach those goals. So if I could ask for Alison for the next slide, please.
Yep.
So that's in this context that our executive director Fatih Birol convened last year the Global Commission on People-Centered Clean Energy Transition. So this commission was led under the patronage of the Danish Prime Minister. It was chaired by Dan Jørgensen, who's the Danish Energy Minister, and it was co-chaired by the Senegalese Energy Minister. And this commission brought together 30 government leaders, 21 ministers, but also some representatives from labor, from youth, from civil society, from energy access, people from all geographies with a lot of with very different perspectives. And the idea behind this commission was over a 10-month-long process of consultation and meeting. The idea was for commission member, based on best practice and kind of drawing from their own experience in their own countries, to come up with a set of 12 actionable recommendations that are here to help other decision makers understand and address the question, how do I make our clean energy policies and program more people-centered? How do I make them more inclusive? Because clean energy transition will have first and foremost for people, they're about people, and international stakeholders really understand that if people are not at the center of those transition programs will fail. They might not be publicly accepted, they might be rejected, and then government will fail on delivering their net zero goals. So if I could ask you for the next slide, please. So you are obviously more welcome more than welcome to check those 12 recommendations on our website. I think we just put a link in the chat box. Those recommendations, they come with a database of 150 case studies from 50 countries, which were collected with the help of commission member. So I wanted just here to give you a kind of a brief snapshot of the themes that were highlighted in this work. So this recommendation highlighted good practice across 4 main areas. So the first one was jobs, of course. with decent job and worker protection as our first theme. So why do we talk about jobs? The energy sector employs over 65 million people. I think that's equivalent to roughly 2% of global employment. And I know that this is obviously an important issue for the people watching us today who probably all work in the energy sector. And here at the IEA, we see clean energy transition as a massive opportunity when it comes to job opportunities. We estimate that the transition will create, I think, 14 million new jobs related to clean energy technology. But that said, we also understand that this transition will cause a lot of disruption to some traditional energy industries around the world. And we estimate that it's likely that it's going to shift around 5 million workers from fossil fuel sectors. So while there are job opportunities, there are also likely disruptions to the labor market. And we also know that jobs will not always be in the same place, created in the same places, that will not always suit the same workers or skill set. So really, this issue of decent job and worker protection is a central issue of people-centered clean energy transition. And in the recommendation of the commission members really focused on job creation, but also on the kind of support and investment governments can give to workers and communities on skill and training. But commission members also look beyond that job and skills issue, which is why we use this broader concept of people-centered clean energy transition. And our second theme was social and economic development. If we go back to the previous slide, Alison. Sorry. So the second, we look beyond the job and skills issue, which is why we. So yeah, what I was talking about is that our second theme was the social and economic development. So let's remember that this transition has to be global if it is to succeed. So I presume that everyone who's watching this webinar right now have access to electricity. But let's not forget that there are still 800 million people around the world today, especially in Asia and Africa, without access to electricity. So when the Commission looked at this theme, they really looked at how we can align clean energy transition with other social and economic development goals, especially around questions like energy access, but also bringing energy access to people who don't have it, whether it is bringing clean cooking to part of the world where that is still the exception, or how we can help social and economic development in the poorest region. And the third theme was equality, social inclusion, and fairness. So this third theme was really looking at how we can ensure gender equality and social inclusion consideration are included in all policies, but also how to ensure clean energy transition policies are designed in a progressive way without any impacts on more vulnerable population. Kind of classic example to illustrate that theme is what happened. I'm talking from France. In France, when the government decided to have an increase in fuel taxes, particularly on diesel fuel, this was designed as a clean energy transition policy, but as we know, it had a disproportionate impact on low-income communities in small and rural areas who had to use their cars to travel to work, to see their families, and this led to those really famous yellow vest protests and demonstration that went on for several months. And finally, our last theme was people as active participants, in which the recommendation here really looked at ways to involve the public through participation and communication, as well as drawing on behavioral science to design successful behavior change policies. So this was a very successful process, this commission. It brought many different actors around the same table, and it's good for me to stress here that we cannot underestimate the importance of international dialogue among diverse stakeholders to achieve the aims of this transition. And maybe I could ask for the next slide, please. And so in this respect, I just wanted to finish by mentioning this new initiative from the IEA, which was convened earlier this year by our executive director. It's the IEA Clean Energy Labour Council. This council brings together representatives from all around the world. It is co-chaired by Sharon Burrow, who's the General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation, which is the the world's largest trade union federation. I think it represents about 200 million workers. And so this new Labor Council is really meant to be a platform of exchange to bring the voice of labor in the work that we do here at the International Energy Agency. The most similar, we've got an initiative that's quite similar, that's the Energy Business Council, which was created, I think, 13 years ago, which was created to promote dialogue between the IEA and the business energy community. But this Energy Business Council has got a number of CEOs from oil and gas, but also from renewable companies and energy efficiency services. And so in the future, what we have with this initiative at the IEA, such as the Business Council, the Labor Council, is really the capacity to bring together and convene the governments we work with and that we represent, employers, businesses, and labor. And I would like to really end this presentation by stressing again the value of international collaboration between diverse stakeholders beyond the traditional energy domains. And what these international convening initiatives have done here at the IEA is really to help us foster the kind of a global dialogue between different sectors, which we really trust is an essential ingredient to a successful global people-centered clean energy transition. So thank you, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Matthieu. I'm just going to make sure I'm highlighted here too, so we can have our chat. There we go. Right. Well, thank you very much. I think, yeah, it's obvious how many different stakeholders are involved with this and how complex it is. And it's great to see IEA really is a facilitator of that, of all those different stakeholders. I guess one of the first things I wanted to bring up was around the term just transition. And, you know, you've called it a people-centered transition plan rather than a just transition. I'm just wondering what the thoughts were around that, because I quite like the people-centered term, but just because people are maybe more familiar with the just transition term.
No, I mean, so just transition is a very important term that we also use in some of our work at the IEA. Just transition is really about social justice and around about that theme that I mentioned earlier on decent jobs and workers' protection. The International Labour Organization published in 2015 their guidelines for just transition, which really set the principles very well. And actually the Commission recommendation took note of those guidelines. But when we did this commission, the idea was really to provide policymakers with all the tools that they needed to be able to deliver those energy transition in a people-centered way. And of course, job is a very important theme, but we also wanted to look beyond just this jobs and workers protection theme and to include themes such as youth participation, gender equality, public participation, communication with the public, behavioral change, energy access, some social and economic development considerations, which is why we've decided to come up with a kind of broader concept that can provide stakeholders around the world and decision makers with all the pieces of clean energy, of people-centered clean energy transition that they need to think about.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I mean, yeah, behavioral change, as you say, is another big part that we need to address that this can encompass. So I like that. So you're talking about all the different stakeholders on the commission and beyond. So maybe we can try and break it down a little bit and talk about what we think the responsibilities are of different parts of that group of stakeholders. For example, governments play a big part.
Okay, sorry, Alison, we got cut off. I don't know. I think it's your internet was not working. Sorry.
Okay, you can hear me now, though.
Yeah,
I'm back. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So in terms of government, you've talked quite a lot about policy, and obviously that's going to be central for a lot of this. So maybe you can talk a little bit more about specific responsibilities of the government in a people-centered transition.
Yeah, I mean, the role of government is really paramount here. You know, as I mentioned, all these issues that I discussed earlier, those issues around skills, around labor issues, the responsibilities of diverse ministries of the government. But governments have really like a strong responsibility when it comes to establishing clear and transparent long-term clean energy strategy that will really help to stimulate and to kind of de-risk investment from the private sector. So the role of government here is really to the kind of like early research and development, the kind of like pre-commercial de-risking, replicable demonstration project, the kind of loans program that they have, the kind of regulatory framework that they're going to set, incentives that are going to spur investment in clean energy. And also for it's really the role of government to kind of create a market before there is a real clear market for this clean energy. One more thing that you can also say about the responsibility of government is that in the relationship with citizens, it is the role of government to clearly communicate about those clean energy transition strategies, not only to communicate so that people can understand their benefits, but so that people can understand also their impact to some degrees on their lives.
Yeah, so helping people, have better literacy around energy and its role and how things are going to change, I suppose, as we go forward. I think Tony said he had a question around government, and maybe we'll just throw that in now. Tony.
Well, yeah, just quick, as you're talking about government, I was curious if you were aware or could cite any particular government commission that was as a good example or that was particularly successful, because here in North America I'm only aware of specifically in Alberta, Canada, and in California are there commissions set up as just transition on the energy transition. So I'm just wondering if you could cite any specific like successful examples of a government program around.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of like a lot of countries especially in the global north. It is Canada, but like even the current Biden administration is doing lots of work on this. They've got their interagency group on coal and power plant communities. A lot of the UK, I think 2 years ago, as part of their climate action strategy, developed this green jobs task force, and this green jobs task force brought together representatives from labor unions, from academia, from industry, and what they did is they were able to estimate that I think it was 90% of the skills of workers in the oil and gas sectors could be medium to high transferable skills to sectors like hydrogen, offshore wind, carbon capture and utilization and storage. And actually this was quite this green jobs task force was a useful process because it ended up with the UK with that North Sea transition deal that the UK government did with oil and gas company in the UK, which is basically a commitment from oil and gas company in the North Sea of the UK to commit to 16 billion pound of investment into diversifying their activities into clean energy sectors, but also into reskilling the workers, especially in those sectors I just mentioned earlier of offshore wind, hydrogen, and CCUS.
Okay, so we see the government is trying to set long-term direction and reducing some risk in areas, maybe putting some money into reskilling. So what would you say more the specific role of businesses within this, given that they're usually driven by whatever the market is pushing toward?
Yeah, I mean the role of businesses is just as important, especially in terms of investment. I spoke to colleagues from the Department of Energy last week who are in charge of working on those issues, and they were saying that in the way they see this is that for every single dollar that the government puts into those kind of programs, the private sector should be matching this by 1,000 time. So there's obviously like a clear role for the private sector to diversify their activities into these clean energy sectors, and to support the kind of skills development program of their workers to support these strategies. So the role of businesses is really important here, and we've known lots of good examples of that.
It feels like it's quite early stage though. Most people I know who are upskilling are doing it themselves and paying for it themselves. So I guess that comes to the third one about the civil society and individuals. So people listening to this who are in the oil and gas industry, what's their role? I guess in getting themselves ready for the transition, but also that wider people-centered transition.
I mean, like as I mentioned earlier, there's this last theme of the recommendations, which is about seeing people as active participants. So it's really important for, everyone has a role to play. Obviously, this is a global issue. This is a transformation of a system at a scale that we probably have never seen before. Everyone has a role to play when we talk about active people as participants. It's really the importance of making sure that people are involved in the discussions early on. So whether it is involving, labor unions in discussion about the future of jobs, whether it's about involving communities in discussion around local infrastructure, local natural resources, the use of local natural resources. It's about listening to people's fears, legitimate fears, about addressing them. It's also about allowing people to innovate, to propose solution. You mentioned for people in the energy sector, but this obviously these great changes are going to affect literally every single one of us, whether or not you work in the energy sector. It's going to have an impact on the way we travel, on the way we move from one place to another, on the way we live in our homes. So there's really an important role for people to play. And when the recommendation look at people as active participants, it's really thought about people as voters, of course, but also as participants in citizen convention processes. For example, we've got good example of citizen convention on climate change in France, in the UK, in Ireland, that have been able to kind of discuss and propose solution for the government on these critical issues. It's about the importance of public dialogue in public spheres, and also even more important, the role of people as consumers, as decision makers who are making decision on the kind of thing that the products that they're going to buy, on the way they use their energy using equipment. And then of course there's all these behavioral change policies, and we learn a lot about how to do this well. We in the US, it's estimated that 20% of energy use could be reduced in the residential sector through behavioral change policies. To give you a concrete example, the most classic example of behavior change policies will be real-time information, like smart electric meters, which have got a impact on people's consumption and energy usage. And then, of course, there's this role for people to communicate to people, what is that you're doing, and here there's a role to play for government in terms of public awareness campaigns and designing well-crafted messages that can reach people and engage them in those kind of energy saving or clean energy practices.
Yeah, that's what I really liked about your report. There are lots of kind of positive examples in there of where these things are starting to happen, but it does feel like it's fairly early days on some of it. We may come back to that if we have time to talk about a couple more examples. But I think, obviously a lot of people here are in the energy workforce. They're probably most interested in how they might be effectively supported through this. So maybe you've talked about a couple of examples, perhaps in the UK with the green job skills. Maybe are there other examples?
Yeah,
bring up, or do you think it's still a bit lacking in a lot of places?
No, it's not lacking. It's even. Of course, it is even early days to some extent for the IEA in terms of the work that we're doing on this, that we're developing. We we know that, for example, coal is a sector that we often talk about because it's the highest emitting one as part of those this transition. But obviously, we also know that there's going to become some labor disruption in other sectors, especially as a demand for oil and gas reduces. We know that the skills of oil and gas workers are highly transferable to other energy sector. For example, if you take let's say petroleum engineering skills, those can be highly applicable to geothermal, to seismic interpretation, to drilling. If you take chemical engineers in refineries, with the knowledge of raw material and equipment can really lead to production of to them transferring to production of green fuels and hydrogen. We know that skilled workers in oil and gas can also transfer to deepwater offshore wind, to CCUS. We know there's lots of overlap between workers on oil rig platform and workers on offshore wind platform. So we're not saying this is easy, obviously, and we know that the kind of scales, such a scale of redeployment of workers on this also means that there will be a need for a detailed assessment of the workforce skills and needs of companies. And that's really something that the AEA is doing more work on at the moment, and so that we can kind of provide government and companies with the kind of data that they will need to develop those kind of detailed mapping of their workforces. So, and there's lots of things already being done on this. There's even I can think about this. In the Netherlands, there's this energy recruiting company called Brunel that has just developed this new degree for oil and gas workers to retrain them into hydrogen. And this is, I think it's in pilot phase at the moment, but they're going to develop this as a national program. The automotive sector is another very interesting one. We know this is also a sector, the automobile industry, that's going to face some disruption in terms of labor. The reason for this is because of the uptake of electric vehicles, which have fewer components and are easier to assemble. So the kind of labor intensity of making electric vehicles is actually less than that of making vehicles with internal combustion engines. So now here the work that some companies are doing, which is about developing the skills of the workforce so that, for example, the manufacturing of batteries could be done in-house and compensate for this loss in jobs in the production of electric vehicles. Volkswagen, for example, has developed this, has got this electromobility program that has trained thousands of its workers in what they call high voltage training. And the French government has developed this 50 million fund for foundry workers who are responsible for making metal cast auto parts to retrain them in the production of electric vehicles. So there's lots of things that are already happening. Obviously, it's not enough to reach the goal we need to reach, but there's lots of interesting work that's already happening on this. And I should mention here that the IEA at the moment is working on a report that's specifically on skills development in the clean energy transition, and that will have a database of case studies on this that will be released, I think, at the end of September.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, I think we should mention that the idea is within this series we start to delve down into some of these, because as you said, it's a two thing. Yes, we can say we've got lots of transferable skills and people are very adaptable and resilient, and we can look at that, but then there has to be the new jobs for them to go to. So it's understanding that supply and demand, and both those areas are important. So I hope we can touch on them both with IEA and other schemes as we go forward. Hopefully all these areas where it's being done very well, people can learn from each other and apply it wider. One thing we definitely wanted to talk about was the implications of the war in the Ukraine and the global energy crisis kind of maybe altering people's priorities a little bit, and how we look at a people-centered transition. Obviously, energy security and other things are raising their head more than just decarbonisation. So how does that affect what you guys are trying to do with the energy people-centered transition?
So I mean, obviously, with the war and the invasion of Ukraine, we've got a humanitarian crisis, but we've also got a global energy crisis. It's probably the most severe energy crisis we've known in decades. There's lots of uncertainty in Europe about the supply of energy, the use of energy. Lots of uncertainties about whether Russia will keep supplying us with energy, and lots of European countries obviously seriously considering whether or not, and countries and also citizens, whether or not they want to keep purchasing Russian oil and gas. So there's really a role to play for government and citizens to reduce their dependence on the reliance of Russian oil and gas, but doing it in ways that are aligned with our trajectory to net zero, and doing it in ways that can also lower the bill. So the IEA, in this kind of context of a global crisis, energy crisis, we launched 1 10-pump plans to cut Russian oil by winter, and 1 10-pump plans to cut Russian gas by next winter, which will be the time where energy usage is going to go up, when we're going to have to live in warmer homes, work in warmer offices. And most relevant to our conversation, we worked with the European Commission and we launched 2 months ago Playing My Part, which is a public awareness campaign that include a series of kind of concrete steps that citizens can take to reduce their reliance on Russian oil and gas, to show solidarity with the Ukrainian people, to lower the energy bill, and but also to support climate action. And one of the ideas behind this public campaign was also to raise awareness of the benefits of energy saving, and raise awareness of the importance of energy efficiency in future planning and investment. So with this kind of situation of crisis, we've got a good example here of the kind of collective action around clean energy transition that can be ignited.
So it may help push us in the right direction for decarbonisation, yes, as well, yes, in maybe a painful way to start with. I suppose that comes at the IEA is a global organisation, and that's that's a good reason to have you here. At SP International, there could be people listening from every part of the world. So obviously, a people-centred transition, there are different priorities depending on where you live, your region, country. We've talked about the Ukraine crisis actually affecting people all over the world. But yeah, are there any other examples of how it kind of differs by region when you talked as a global commission and thought about your recommendations?
Yeah, I mean, the thing with that global commission, or with that Clean Energy Labour Council that I mentioned earlier, as you saw, we had very diverse membership. So we had members from all parts of the world. We had members representing the perspective of very big, rich countries, very small, poor countries, energy importers, energy producers, some very agrarian communities. So there was really an understanding in the recommendation that there's not one size fits all solution, and that every single country will have their own clean energy transition pathways, and that the local context matters a great deal. I mean, if you go from one country to another, you'll have very different workforce dynamics, very different economic profile, some with like a much more important social protection schemes are already in place. So that varies from one country to another, but even within a country, from one region to another, if you take a look at, for example, India's got 29 states. There are states in India whose state revenues are heavily dependent on coal, and there are some other states where it's close to zero. And we also know, for example, that fortunately renewable investment in India is not in those coal regions. So the clean energy transition in India is going to look very different from one state to another. And then, of course, there's this question around the kind of like financing and the scale of support that is required, and that is obviously not necessarily affordable to all countries in a similar way.
Difficult problem that we're not going to solve in here, because we are running out of time. And I know the last kind of point I wanted to make was, moving from discussion and recommendations to kind of action implementation. And I've noticed we have a question in the chat asking about, is there any data on the Playing My Part campaign yet? I guess, not just action, but any any results, positive results you see? Is there anything to share as a kind of
playing my part? I'm afraid not. This is a campaign that was just launched 2 months ago, so it would be
okay.
to
Early days.
already impact data, but obviously it was picked up a lot in the media. More specifically, we had one of the kind of concrete actions that citizens could take was to reduce the thermostat by 1 that citizens could collectively take, and that's definitely something that had a lot of impact in the news. So we're not really able to tell you what has been the impact on citizens, but I would really invite you to check online an article on the IEA that we recently published on an awareness campaign, which playing my part was a public awareness campaign, and that's got lots of information on how to design impactful public awareness campaigns for citizens. It's got some very interesting elements to this.
Great, yeah. So yeah, I think we've run out of time now, unfortunately. So there's a lot more we can talk about.
5 more minutes, probably.
1 minute. I would really recommend people having a look at the IEA website that we've put on there and the different recommendations. And I think the idea is we will definitely come back to some of these in more detail with Matthieu or other of his colleagues from IEA to discuss them in more detail and go into them. So hopefully that's given people an overview of the Global Commission for People-Centered Clean Energy Transition. Yeah, thank you very much, Matthieu, for joining us, and everyone for tuning in. And yeah, as I say, look forward to future events as well. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mohammed, again for kicking us off.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you, Matt. I have a question at the end of the meeting. I think we have 3 minutes to go. Okay, Matt, as you said, and you and Alison about the transition and the role of everyone. What is the technical and non-technical skills should be needed from a petroleum engineer or someone who worked on the oil industry to cope with this energy transition direction?
What is the skills of well, I mean, it depends on what you work in the industry. As I said, this is really a topic that the IEA is exploring. It's not none of this obviously scientific. Like there's still this need for kind of like reskilling program, for investment from those oil and gas companies into kind of mapping what are the skills needs of their workers to transition into and to diversify their economic activities. So as I mentioned, this is an area that the IEA is exploring, and that we will be able to share more data and information with you in the coming months.
I mean, I think, from my work in this area, I think someone said something to me which really hit home on the softer skills. It's about being resilient. It's about being adaptable. It's about willingness to continue to learn. So I think it is a hard time to be someone working in oil and gas. But I think if you're willing to learn and keep on top of all these changes that are happening, there are lots of opportunities to learn out there. I think Matt highlighted a few. So I think individuals, you do have to think about your own development too, and just keep learning and hopefully work your way through this transition as an important kind of part of the workforce as it changes.
Thank you, Alison.
My comment.
Thank you. Thank you, Alison.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
Very much, Alison. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.